Welcome back to this interview series with investment platforms. This one is with a platform that has been around for a while, has many customers. They're huge and a really well-known name, Hargreaves Lansdown. And I speak to Emma Wall, who is the head of investment analysis. And yeah, she was really great to talk to. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for joining me because I've got quite a lot of platforms I'm speaking to, but it's really fun to kick off with you because you're the biggest one of them all. So do you want to just tell me a little bit about Hargreaves Lansdown, how long it's been around for, and when you started to think about impact and ESG and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so Hargreaves Lansdown is the UK's biggest investing platform. It's been around for a couple of decades now, and we probably represent around 40% of the market. Traditionally, kind of older investors, but I'm really pleased over the last 10 years we've been getting a lot of younger investors involved, and ESG. Sustainability is really important and part of that. I'd say how long have we been thinking about an impact? I'd say it's been an evolution, like a lot of people and the way that they think about this. When it first began, it was quite a niche concept to think about your money in an ethical way, to think about living your life in an ethical way. But now, over the last couple of years, we've seen some really positive moves in that more and more people are thinking about doing good with their money, which we think is really important.
Yeah, amazing. So how do you do that? So when a customer signs up to Hargreaves Lansdown, I mean, do you have some ready-made funds for them, or do they pick their own funds and stocks? How does it work for somebody who'd want to do that on your platform?
The most important thing to recognise is that we operate an open market. So we're not in the business of excluding investments from people. What we want to do is we want to offer as much range as possible and then help to inform people so that they can make those choices. Because what ethical investing means is different for different people. Some people really don't want to invest in tobacco stocks, for example. For other people, it's animal testing that is a real no-go. So our job is to offer as many different options as possible and the information so that people can make informed decisions.
So for somebody that's just starting out, and there are more and more people actually thinking about investing and having these types of conversations, I think education has started to improve, but there's still got a long way to go with that, and we need to really help people know what they're getting and why it's a good idea. So do you want to start with why investing is a good idea? Why should anybody start?
Investing is really important because increasingly we're in charge of our own financial future. So obviously the government does give us some help, but less than it used to. If you think about the way that most people get into investing, and that's through their workplace, it used to be that your pension, your retirement income, was determined by the salary that you had when you retired. Now it's determined by how much money you put into the pot along the way. So it's really important that you think about your financial future and you care about investing, because ultimately it's going to be the difference between being financially healthy in retirement and through your life and struggling financially.
Mm. And what about if you don't actually have that much money to invest? I know some people, they'll have a big lump sum, or they will be paying monthly, but they'll be paying in quite significant amounts because they've got quite a high income. What about people on an average income, that might only want to invest, say, £50 a month? Is it still worth it for them to do that?
Absolutely, anything that you can spare is important. People are lucky enough to have benefits of a workplace pension. One of the great things about that is whatever you put in, your employer will match, and then the government will top up. So it may only seem like a small amount that you're putting in, but you've got the opportunity there to potentially even triple it through no extra work of your own. For those people who are self-employed, there are also tax benefits to investing for their financial future, which helps mean that you can boost whatever you save with tax back. I mean, ultimately, if you don't invest, you can't expect the money to be there at the end. So every little does help.
And one of the big misconceptions when it comes to ethical impact and sustainability is that you have to compromise on performance. You know, the research that I've seen, it shows that that's not the case. And we actually saw more of that during the pandemic as well. Performance was good. So, I mean, what's your sort of view? What do you say to people that have the idea that, you know, they have to compromise on performance?
I understand where the misconception has come from, and that's come from the fact that ethical investing, what we used to consider or call dark green investing, often means exclusions. So that means not investing in certain sectors which people consider unethical. Now, the thing is, they're in the broader market. So if those investments go up and they're not in your ethical portfolio, your investment will not go up as much. Equally, if it happens the other way around, as we saw earlier this year, so oil companies didn't do very well through the pandemic because the oil price fell, and so ethical portfolios did better. So it's really about understanding what investing ethically or investing in impact funds or investing in sustainable funds means. It means that you sometimes do not have exposure to certain parts of the market. If they do well, you won't do as well. That doesn't mean that you will always do worse. It's just about understanding what you're investing in.
Yeah. And the other misconception is that, and you just touched on it there, is that you're sort of limited to what types of industries or companies you can invest in. And so you don't get the opportunity to spread your risk and diversify. So is that the case? I heard you sort of say no just then, but do you want to say a bit more about that?
So as with anything in life, terminology is really key. So there are several different ways of investing what we call responsibly, that's the umbrella term, ethical, impact, and sustainably. Traditionally, ethical is an exclusionary approach. So it's saying, I do not want to have oil stocks in my portfolio. I do not want to have companies that test on animals, that are involved with arms dealing, tobacco, alcohol. And so that is reducing the amount of companies that you can invest in. But if that matches your morals, then that's important for you. And it's not a reason not to invest, it's just a reason to understand. Investing sustainably means something different. It often means choosing the best in class. So you may have some companies which are involved in those industries, but they've made a commitment to in running their businesses in a sustainable way, in a way that's mindful of environmental, social, and governance factors. So it's a slightly different approach between ethical and sustainable. And then impact is different again. Impact investing is when you have companies that have made a commitment to tackling one of the UN sustainability goals. So whether that's ending poverty or tackling climate change, or making sure that all the world has provision of clean water. So there are slightly different flavors of responsible investing, and it's important to understand what you're investing in.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we can help investors to understand, because there are so many different options, and it's really difficult to tell them apart. And so one of the ways that investors like to learn more about what they're investing in is just to know which companies they're investing in. And what we see now is that we usually get the top 10 holdings. But I think investors want to actually see more than that. They'd like to see 100% if they can. How do you help your customers to see exactly what they're investing in?
So while we do not have the ability to show every single holding in every single fund, what we do is we provide information on how that fund is managed, which I think is really important. So to that point of, if you want to invest in a fund that is exclusionary, we provide that information. So we will say, this fund will not hold these types of stocks, the oil stocks, the animal testing, the tobacco. So if that for you is a line in the sand, although you might not be able to see every single stock that fund is holding, you will be able to align your principles with your investment.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you measure your fund's positive impact? Is that something that you do?
So there is obviously, well, there are thousands and thousands of funds out there, and we're working on tools and services to have a look at the whole of market on a data basis. And so that's something that we're spending a lot of time developing at the moment. On a qualitative analysis basis, which is, opinion based, we cover a smaller number of funds. We cover a couple of hundred funds under research coverage. And for those funds that we do cover, and they tend to be the biggest and most popular within a particular universe, we provide a lot of information about the way that they're run, including in our analysis process, our assessment of the way that they are taking into consideration environmental, social, and governance issues. And this is not just for funds that call themselves responsible. This is for all funds under our research coverage, because we think it's an important question to ask, because we think even if you're not claiming to be a sustainable fund, if you're thinking about investing for the long term, whatever you're investing in, ESG plays a part, because good ESG management is good risk management. You don't want to invest in a fund manager who's completely unaware of the impact of climate change on the companies that they invest in, because ultimately, either through greater regulation or through, consumer pressures, it's something that is important to all companies and therefore should be important to all fund managers.
So do you do all of your own research then? Is it all in-house and you come up with those methodologies and what's good and what's not? Okay, that's interesting. A lot of work, but great. So there is still a lot of greenwash out there. What can people do to really cut through that and find out exactly what their investments are doing? I mean, because you can see a lot of things that will be labelled as ESG or impacts, and actually the quality of those funds are quite different. Some are just not that good. So what can a regular, person like me do?
The first thing I'd say is to leverage the research that you have at your fingertips, those people who do have better access. So my analysis team and I, we have the opportunity to talk directly to fund managers. We're not the only ones out there. There's lots of other providers of research, and I'd say utilize that. Because the questions that we ask are really designed to get to the heart of exactly that, the greenwashing. So we want to know things such as, is ESG built into their own analysis process? So show me an example of a company that you're investing in and the questions you are asking of that company. Show me an example of the template that you use for analysis. I don't want to just see financial metrics in there. I want to see ESG metrics in your own analysis process. Give me an example of where you've engaged with a company on an ESG measure. Tell me about your ESG process. What's really interesting is when you're talking to a fund manager, if they can answer all those questions themselves, you have a pretty good idea of whether they are really up to scratch on ESG. If they have to turn to somebody else on their team or say, I'll get back to you on that, then maybe it's not as integrated as they're claiming. So what I would say for retail investors, for day-to-day investors, is leverage the research that's already out there. People are doing this, we're doing it, our competitors are doing it, third parties are doing it, leverage that.
Yeah, and where would they find that? I mean, is that just on your website? Do you have a little description about what you found and what your opinion is of a particular fund manager? I mean, how would your service help them to get that information?
So on our website, we have a responsible investment hub, which has lots of education about the difference between ethical, sustainable and impact investing and some examples. It also has links to all of our fund updates that we do for all funds under coverage. And on our fund updates, we have something called the culture section. And in the culture section, we always explain what we consider the approach of that fund manager to be on an ESG basis and how we consider that they've done. And as I said before, it's not up to us to say, look, if you don't invest in ESG, you're not going to be under our coverage. What we really want to do is provide end investors with the information so that they can make informed decisions, so they can align their morals and their money.
Okay, great. So when exploring investing using your platform, there isn't kind of a person to get any financial advice from. At what point should people seek financial advice from a professional financial advisor?
Investing is confusing. We know this. It's a complex subject. We try our hardest to make it as simple as possible, but sometimes you do just want a one-to-one piece of advice explainer. So never be afraid of reaching out for financial advice. There's lots of different ways you can get financial advice these days. You don't have to, it doesn't have to always be expensive or in-depth. As a sort of general rule, one of the ways that we see people interacting with financial advice is when they're facing a big change, a big life change. So it might be buying a house, it might be getting married, it might be writing a will, it might be that they've inherited some money. Those tend to be triggers when people talk to financial advisors, although of course they're not the only reasons that you ever want to get in touch with a financial advisor. And one thing to really be mindful of, and which I think is really positive, is just because you start to talk to a financial advisor doesn't mean that there's a commitment. You could speak to them on a one-off basis, really up your own personal knowledge, and then go from there on your own. Or if you want that ongoing commitment, of course, you can form, a lifelong relationship with an advisor, but it's really can be tailored to what you need.
And another way that people can have a bit more control over their money and what they're invested in, and the companies that they're investing in, is actually exercising your shareholder rights and voting at AGMs. So there are a couple of platforms actually that are being developed to help individuals like you and me vote at AGMs. I mean, what do you think of that concept? Do you think that's where things are going? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think, people should look out for that and make an effort to use those platforms if they do want to have more of a positive impact?
One of the great things about ESG and the rise in popularity of sustainable investing is I think that it builds investor engagement. And we know from studies where if you are interested in your finances, you're more likely to make informed decisions and therefore better decisions about your financial future. So anything that helps with engagement, such as voting, I think is a really positive thing. And we're looking into functionality on our website as well and on our platform to help encourage that. And it's also one of the great things about being a UK investor. The minority shareholder doesn't have as many rights across the world, but in the UK, you do have a voice. So I would always say use it.
And then just finally, something that I'm really passionate about is seeing more underrepresented groups starting to think about investing. So women, people of colour, people on lower incomes. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of a change in demographic amongst your customer base? Or are there things that you're doing to try and diversify the types of investors you're seeing using your platform?
Absolutely. I think it's so important. The democratization of investing is one of the things that our company was built on. The idea that you could go to somewhere, to a third party, and access investments. Everyone can do it. You can do it from as little as £25 a month. It shouldn't just be for the pale male stale wealthy individuals. One of the things I think has been really positive in this democratization of investment is workplace pensions. So the auto enrolment scheme, which means that if you're employed and you earn over £10,000, you're automatically enrolled into a pension scheme. Now that's created thousands of what I call accidental investors, people who previously would not have had the time or the inclination to invest, now have the key to potentially a really secure financial future. And I think that's really positive.
Yeah. Well, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me and talking to people about what you do and how you approach it. And yeah, hopefully lots of people will go to your website to check you out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate that. Cheers.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.